What are the corporate media still getting wrong about Bitcoin even in 2021? My name is Stefan Livera. I host one of the world's leading Bitcoin podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Stefan Livera. Find my website at stefanlivera.com. So getting into this article, it's called The Brutal Truth About Bitcoin. It's by Eswar Prasad, professor at Cornell University, and it's for New York Times opinion. Now, there's a range of misconceptions and things that we need to clear up in this article, but it essentially starts with the point about volatility, right? There's this big eightfold increase. The whole quote-unquote cryptocurrency market exceeds 1.5 trillion, and then there was the big drop recently in May. Now, the first point about volatility is we have to think about this more from a long-term point of view. Those of us in Bitcoin, we have a fundamental long-term view about what Bitcoin is and where it's going. We think it's going to millions of dollars per coin, 10 million plus. So yes, it's going to be volatile on the way. This thing started at zero in 2009. And let's be clear, historically, if you look on a 10-year basis, as I make this video today, 15th of June 2021, the 10-year compound annual growth rate over 10 years is 117%. If you calculate that number on a 5-year basis, it's 124%. What has the S&P done over 5 years on an annualized basis? Something like 12%. So really, think of it like this volatility, it's the price you pay for this incredible return, right? We are getting a return, call it 8-9 times what the S&P 500 would return. So yeah, in order for that, you're going to have to deal with some volatility. So essentially, that means you size your position. You size your, you take your position based on the level of, risk that you're comfortable taking and the return that you would like. And obviously, no return without risk. So now let's get into some of these other points. So here, as far as talking about how, the idea is Bitcoin, you use it without a trusted third party. Now that much is true. We aim to give people self-sovereignty, and we encourage and educate people in that direction. We want you to take control and be sovereign, financially sovereign. And that'll become important later on. And now, later on, as well as hitting some of the points about, it's the preferred currency for illicit activities. Not really true, because the US dollar is far more preferred for illegal activities than Bitcoin is. Also, we should accept that it's a neutral tool. Some people are going to use it for good, and some people will use it for bad. That's the reality of the world, and we should view this on net. It on net has great benefits to the world. I could be out here saying criminals use the internet. Let's ban the internet, right? And so, or this idea of it's really shadowy. Don't use it. It's this kind of dark thing. Well, I think the reality is that the vast majority of people using and buying Bitcoin are doing it for legal purposes. They're not even out there trying to be criminals. It's just that this is an easy angle to sort of smear Bitcoin with. And this is a common line that we're still seeing about Bitcoin. How many years into it now? Now, this next part around Bitcoin being so-called cumbersome, expensive, and slow, I think it just means you're not using it the right way. All right. Now, yes, it's true that if you want to do a Bitcoin on-chain transaction, the transaction fee for that will range, right? So it could be anywhere from a few dollars to $20 or even higher you could pay in terms of transaction fee for that on-chain transaction. But think of that more like a settlement. That is not necessarily what we will be doing retail transactions using. For retail level transactions, we will be using things like the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is this layer up on top of Bitcoin. Think of it like that. And we essentially can do instant transactions. And the fee for that is in the, a few sats. So basically 0.0000, like some tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, basically. And so the cost in real terms for that, in fiat terms, is a fraction of a cent. We're talking like 0.03 of a cent to do that sort of transaction using Lightning today. Now, of course, that may change over time, but it's still tiny compared to what Eswar is representing this thing as. The reality of it is that people who want to do small value commerce will use the Lightning Network, or they will use other layers. There may even be custodians who help, a retail bank who help their customers and deal with this sort of thing in the background for them. So it's really not accurate to think of it like, it's slow and cumbersome and expensive. It's really not. You're just using it wrong. And it's just, to be honest, in 2021, you should know better than to write it like this. It's just very, very dishonest, or shows very poor level of research into the topic that you're writing about. As for the unstable value, well, even here, what people do in practice is that they will have a cash balance of either US dollars and Bitcoin, and then vary based on what transactions they foresee themselves doing. And then on the other hand, when a Bitcoin merchant is accepting Bitcoin in exchange for their service or their product, they will just do a conversion at the point of sale. So as an example, if they're selling it for $50 worth of Bitcoin, then the person paying Bitcoin, that part fluctuates and they'll do a conversion right then and there. There are also payment processors who will do that conversion so they can take Bitcoin and then receive Australian dollars. Or on the other hand, there are the reverse side, people like Jack Mallers who are creating Strike. Now with Strike, you can actually pay with fiat, your fiat, and that merchant will receive it in Bitcoin. So there's all sorts of ways of dealing with this kind of thing. It's just not showing a real level of engagement into what's actually going on in the Bitcoin space. Now, here, there's a section here about, moreover, it's become clear that Bitcoin does not offer true anonymity, right? So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to say, look how illegal, blah, blah, blah. It's, but now actually, we can't, we're actually tracking you down and we're stopping this, and see, it doesn't even work for that. Well, which one is it? You got to pick one or the other, mate. As for this part, well, I think essentially the short version of what happened with this story of Darkside Hacking Collective, who did a ransomware attack, essentially the government would have seized a server with the private keys on it, or basically asked a custodian to give back the Bitcoins. And so in either case, it came down to in this case, the Hacking Collective Darkside not securing their Bitcoins in a way that could not be remotely confiscated. Now, in Bitcoin, if you correctly do this, if you set up a non-custodial wallet, say a hardware wallet, or even a phone wallet, or if you have a multi-signature setup, you can have multiple keys distributed, it's much, much more difficult to centrally claim. You can't centrally confiscate those coins. That would mean somebody has to go and actually physically get the private keys. And, that especially in a multi-signature context, that would be much more difficult to do. So I think this part is, again, it's not really showing an understanding of what's going on here. As for failing in its stated objectives and becoming a speculative investment, well, to some extent, everything is a speculation. There is to be an entrepreneur is to have to speculate. So I think that part is, again, it's trying to make out like it's more negative than it really is. As for this section about no intrinsic value and it's not backed by anything, so think of it this way: all value is subjective. So really, what are we thinking about Bitcoin's valuation on? Well, we're thinking about it more on its ability to be a money. We're thinking, what kind of monetary characteristics does it have? How credible is this commitment to scarcity, the 21 million cap of Bitcoin? How useful would it be if you could send that money anywhere in the world, and if you did it correctly, nobody could stop you? How valuable would that be, right? How valuable would it be to be able to accept donations if you are running a protest under some kind of authoritarian or tyrannical regime? Well, yeah, that would be quite valuable, wouldn't it? Or how valuable would it be for you to be able to save your value over the long term, right? So again, if you're thinking 4 years plus, 5 years, 10 years, or even longer, then yeah, Bitcoin has historically done extremely well over those time periods. So in this next section, he's saying Bitcoin devotees will tell you that, like gold, its value comes from its scarcity. But he's saying scarcity by itself can hardly be a source of value. But as I've just explained, it's not scarcity on its own. It's scarcity and these other things all mixed together. This idea that anybody can check the rules, anybody can run a Bitcoin node, which is the software that allows you to check that the rules are correct, and it allows you to interact with the network, right? So you can run a Bitcoin wallet, but that's not necessarily the same as running a Bitcoin node. But essentially, the point here is that it's a network that you are joining. It's a great monetary network, and it gives us assurances and things that the fiat banking world simply cannot provide us. That's why Bitcoin is so much better, and so far different from what fiat banking or gold allows us. Now, as for this stuff around greater fool theory, I think that's, again, it's wrong. It's this whole idea that, you guys are just idiots and you're just pumping your bag onto the next person. We see this more like you're joining a network, and the more people who are part of that network, the more valuable it is to be a part of that network. So think back to email or the internet, the early days. in the first few days, when people were first using email, of course, it would not have been as valuable to join the email network. But then over time, as more and more other people were getting email, well, now you have more people who you can email. It's the same sort of thing with Bitcoin. The more people who are joining the network, who are what we say holding Bitcoin, the larger that network grows, the larger the overall adoption, right? The idea is as cash balances, as more and more people around the world start to think of Bitcoin as part of their cash balance, as part of their long-term savings, then you can now trade more easily with them. So this whole idea of greater fool theory is very, very misguided. Now, so let's get into some of this stuff. So now he's getting into transactions are processed by miners using massive amount of computing power in return for rewards in the form of Bitcoin. And now he's saying it uses as much energy as entire countries like Argentina and Norway. Now, here's the reality. We want to use more energy, and that's a good thing. Believe me or not, that's the truth. Using more energy on net is a huge benefit to us as humans. We need it because it is what gives us all of these other excellent things that we need in our lives, whether it's food and shelter and clothing and products that are made out of fossil fuels and all sorts of things like that. So in the case of Bitcoin, you have to think about what are the benefits of Bitcoin. Well, it's having a Bitcoin standard, having the ability to create a money that's not centrally confiscated, can't be centrally confiscated, a money that can't be centrally debased. This idea of a money that anybody can join, any monetary system that anyone can join. If you've got a phone, you can spin up a Bitcoin wallet just in 2 seconds, and you can receive money and you can do commerce. Remember, there are a lot of people on this earth who don't have access to the same kind of fiat banking that we do, those of us in the Western world. So you've got to think about the actual benefit, the net benefit to society. You've also got to think about what would the benefits be of living under a hard money standard. We would actually be living under a growth deflation context. I've done various episodes on my podcast, and I might link some of those in the description for those of you interested. But episodes like my show with Guido Hulsmann, Philip Bargus, Rahim Tagiza Degen, or my episodes with Safedine Amus, the author of the Bitcoin Standard. We talk about all of these concepts on my show. Now, he gets into this kind of canard about, blockchain technology. So this is one of those things, and to be honest, this is like, that meme with the what year is it? This meme has been around since 2014. Blockchain technology, as though some bank executive would come out and say, I don't think Bitcoin is the real innovation. Blockchain is the real innovation. No, wrong. Blockchain is not the real innovation. Bitcoin was the result of something like 4 decades of cryptographers, researchers, computer scientists, privacy activists, cypherpunks, all culminating into what Bitcoin is, right? Blockchain is just one part of Bitcoin. And so people are just trying to take it out of that context and put it in somewhere else when it doesn't really even make sense. Blockchain, in that sense, was used because it helps people achieve a decentralized consensus. It helped them come to an agreement. What is the state of the ledger of Bitcoin in a decentralized way? You can't just sort of take that out of its place, out of its context, outside of the other pieces that make Bitcoin important or make it valuable and made it work. For example, proof of work, distributed timestamping, all of these other pieces that went into Bitcoin. It's not just like this separate standalone technology that we can use, right? And then now, as for this, for migrant workers sending remittances back to their home countries, such fees are a major burden. Well, that's actually an example where Bitcoin and the Lightning Network have come into play. So if you see my episode with Jack Mallers, I think it's episode 269 off the top of my head, where Jack talks about how he has created this new app. It's called Strike. It allows people to send remittances back home to their family in El Salvador. And this was actually part of the story of the president of El Salvador looking to make Bitcoin a legal tender for the, call it 6.5 million people of El Salvador, and say 2 million or so who are Salvadorans in the US. So yeah, this is a real example where extreme low fees are now possible thanks to Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. So yeah, this is exactly a technology that makes payments cheaper, quicker, and it's easier to use. So it's all sorts of confusion here. So you can see variants of Bitcoin's technology. I mean, Bitcoin is what's making products and services available to the masses at low cost. So you can see that there also. Now, as for the comments around inequality, well, that's another whole rabbit hole that we could go down. But the short version of it would be that in our modern fiat world, if you don't earn assets, you're losing out. You are unfortunately not able to win in this overall game because the system, in some sense, is rigged against you in a way that if you are not earning enough to beat CPI, the inflation rate, then you are losing value over time. So one way to frame this and think of this is that if you have your money in the bank account, it's like you're sitting on a melting ice cube. And this is why Bitcoin is important, to actually change some of this and to bring back justice and to make it so that you can actually save. In many countries around the world, people are facing housing affordability issues because the deal that was available to their baby boomer or Gen X parents is not available to them as a millennial or a Gen Z. This is why we're seeing a lot of all this random speculation into random meme coins and so on. Bitcoin is part of the answer to this. So it's important that we get those aspects of this right. So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. Make sure you subscribe to my podcast. Find me at stefanlivera.com or find me on Twitter at stefanlivera. Thanks, and I'll see you in the Citadels.